Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast, live from Orlando, Florida, where we are getting ready for the Citrus Bowl. And we are going to break down our six-pack of questions, Joey Wagner and I, about Illinois heading into this game. We'll hit on the matchup. We'll hit on the offseason for Illinois and the latest there. But first, let's get to know the opponent. And we have Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur, covers South Carolina Gamecocks for 24/7 Sports. He's down here in Orlando as well. I got to meet him the other day. Hale, thanks for joining us and giving us some insight on South Carolina, one of the hottest teams in the country, man.
Yeah, happy to be on with you guys, and we'll certainly be interested to hear what you guys have to say about Illinois, because I'm kind of late on doing my research on figuring out who this team is and what South Carolina's got ahead of them here in a couple days.
Yeah, where are you at in this offseason? Because it is kind of playing catch up because we're so focused on the portal. We're so focused on, I know, offensive coordinator for, the Gamecocks here with, new offensive coordinator coming in with Dowell Loggins heading off. It's hard to get our grasp on that. There's an actual football game here, but it seems like this one means something for South Carolina. Certainly means something for Illinois trying to get to a 10th win. So let's just start there, Hale. What's this game, the Citrus Bowl game, mean for the South Carolina program?
It means a lot. You alluded to trying to get that 10th win, and that's something that's only happened, I think, 4 other times in program history. So just that alone is enough said, right? It would be a big deal, and it's not lost on Shane Beamer what that means or would mean for this team to be able to do it, and for him as a head coach, a guy who'd never been a head coach before he got the job here in 2021. And he was around for a couple of those teams working for Steve Spurrier when they won 10 games. And he's aware of what that would mean for the program and the trajectory that could kind of put them on moving forward. So it's been a fantastic season so far, 9-3. The total wins, according to Las Vegas before the season, was 5.5. So they surprised a lot of folks. And one stat that I heard from my coworker John Whittle at the Big Spur that I thought was pretty impressive. And if I'm misquoting what he said, please forgive me. But it was something along the lines of like back when they were winning those 10 games per season for like 3 straight years under Steve Spurrier. They were preseason, I think, top 12 each of those seasons. So they came into those years with high expectations and obviously lived up to them. Whereas this team right now here in 2024 had next to no expectations, and they've exceeded them already. So it would be a big deal for sure.
This is a Spider-Man meme right now.
Yeah, Joe. I was about to say this sounds familiar. Illinois 5.5 wins. I mean, these are 2 of the surprises. If it weren't for Indiana, Illinois would have been the surprise in the Big Ten, and South Carolina would probably the surprise in the SEC. So, what is the story of this season? Just big picture, Hale. Like, how did this team surprise everybody?
Yeah, there are a few different chapters as far as how it played out. I guess early on they're very defensive led, really talented bunch over there. They'll be down Kyle Kennard, the defensive end who transferred in from Georgia Tech. He's opted out and getting ready for the draft. Leads the team in sacks with 11, I believe it is. So he made an impact early. Without him and freshman Dylan Stewart, the other starting defensive end, they probably lose to Old Dominion in the opener. So carried by the defense early on. The Kentucky game, saw some flashes from LaNorris Sellers. Very, very much a defensive-led win. LaNorris played well in the first half against LSU, then got hurt, and they lost that game. And just that game that day is a whole chapter in and of itself with how it played out and what it's meant for this season as a whole for Carolina. Then you blow out Akron, play Ole Miss. Everybody stinks in that game, coaches, players. Then they go to Alabama and have a tough loss. But after that game, the season turned around, and defensive-led win at Oklahoma. Then things started picking up for LaNorris in the offense in November, and here we are, hottest team in college football, many would say. And so, yeah, defense first and foremost. They're talented at every level. They helped them win a lot of games this year. We're the reason they won some games this year. And, of course, LaNorris and what he's done for the last 4 or 5 games and how spectacular he's been as well. And I guess another storyline for the game is LaNorris won't have his backfield mate in Rocket Sanders, who's also opted out, but certainly he had a big part in this whole season as well with his game-winning touchdown against Missouri in November. So that's kind of the main talking points, I guess. Is, defensive oriented team for sure. Then LaNorris Sellers playing like a rock star these last 5-6 games.
Well, those are the two things, Hale, I wanted to touch with you on. Is let's start with the defense, and obviously Kyle Kennard opting out. He's exceptional, right? I mean, he just go make a lot of money somewhere. But what is this defense? What's made it as good as it has, and what's Dylan Stewart's role on that? I mean, you look at him; he's a freshman. That's absurd to see what he's doing as a freshman edge rusher. So tell us a little bit about what makes it good, and then focus on Dylan, because I think it's really impressive what he's able to do.
Yeah, I think it's that old cliche of it all starts up front. The line, whether it's Kennard and Stewart who are rushing the passer, or the guys along the interior. Alex Huntley, one of the guys y'all saw at the press conference the other day, has been with the program since Will Muschamp was here. So he's old and been around forever. Tonka Hemingway, who's another difference maker inside, same thing. He's been around since Muschamp. And TJ Sanders, originally committed to Muschamp, then signed with Beamer's first class. So again, those it starts with those 3 guys along the interior, and like I said, they're old and been around for a long time, and they're good too. They're not just older guys who are getting by because they're a little more physically mature and all that type of stuff. They're talented players. So yeah, that's been the biggest key for this team, being so good up front. But more specifically, the pass rush. I mean, that in 2023 it was an issue. If you go back and look at the stats, you can just see it right there on your screen. They had trouble sacking quarterbacks last year, so they go out and get Kennard from the portal, who was just a big get for them, obviously, and Dylan Stewart, who they got out of high school, 5-star recruit, who's lived up to every expectation, probably exceeded them. I mean, it's one thing for these guys to come in as 5-star recruits and meet expectations in year one, and he's certainly done that. So he's been a real difference maker. Like I said a minute ago, without him and Kyle Kennard, they don't beat Old Dominion. So those guys have been a big part of it all, and they've got depth at end too. They've got some other guys who play a lot and are pretty good players as well. So it really starts up front for this defense, and that's not to say they aren't talented at linebacker, because maybe I think for those of us who watch this team every week, there are probably quite a few folks who would say that Demetrius Knight at linebacker, who transferred in from Charlotte, started his career at Georgia Tech, might be the best player on the defense this season, the most impactful player on the defense this season. Then in the secondary, they're old in the secondary, very, very talented as well. So they're all 3 levels. They're really good, and it's a fun defense to watch because they play like a good, like, team oriented brand of ball. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Well, the Knight line is surprising. So why do people think that about him when you go down the defense and see who else is on there, and what's his impact been?
He's, first of all, like the off-field stuff. He's remarkable. Like, if you guys have any time or want to listen to him talk, like, you'll see what I mean. Like, he's an older guy. I mean, he's in his 5th year, I believe it is, of college football. So he's older. He's married. He's got a couple kids. So he's like just beyond his years that way. But he's also really good at football. He signed at Georgia Tech when Paul Johnson was still there running the triple option. He signed as a quarterback. So when Jeff Collins came in and started over, they moved him to linebacker. So he didn't play a ton on defense, played mostly special teams, and was still kind of learning his way. Then transferred to Charlotte for 2023 and had a great season. Then still, when he got in the portal, he was still kind of overlooked a little bit. I mean, South Carolina beat Houston and UCF to get him. So now that they've had him, he's a big, physical, fast, super smart, just a leader of the defense, like the kind of typical type of guy you want playing middle linebacker for you. So he's got all those intangibles, and the tangibles are there as well. And he's just a really good, smart instinct, got good instincts, got the physical tools. I mean, he made the interception in the Clemson game to clinch that game. He's made just big play after big play all season, and without him, they're probably not 9-3, definitely not 9-3. So he's been really good and a lot of fun to watch, and an instant fan favorite back in Columbia for sure.
Well, hell, Illinois played a lot of talented quarterbacks this year. I mean, Jalen Daniels of Kansas ended the year really well. Nebraska freshman Dylan Ariola is really talented. Drew Aller at Penn State. Dylan Gabriel was a Heisman finalist. Even Aiden Childs in Michigan State is really good. But it feels like LaNorris Sellers could be a souped-up version of some of these guys with how big, how strong his arm is, how athletic he is. The SEC Freshman of the Year, as you said, his final 6 games were sensational. What makes him so good? Because it feels like, he could be a guy that enters next year as a redshirt sophomore with a lot of NFL draft buzz. So what makes him so special?
The physical tools. I mean, he's 6'3", 240. If you looked at him, you wouldn't think he's 240, just the way he's put together. I mean, his lower body is super strong. I think that helps him elude some of those sacks that you guys I'm sure have seen when watching the highlights, and how he's able to shake off some of those defenders. I mean, he's a big, strong guy. I can't remember what his squat number is, but it's something ridiculous that most quarterbacks aren't coming anywhere close to hitting. So just the raw physical athleticism. I mean, he's got a live arm too. It's not like he's just a guy who's out there running around and making people look silly that way. Like he can sling the football. He's still developing as a passer, growing as a quarterback. And that's probably the scary part, guys, is he's just kind of scratching the surface that way at the position. And Mike Shula a couple weeks ago when we were talking to him in Columbia kind of let the cat out of the bag and said, hey, LaNorris has made a lot of great plays as a runner. And he mentioned one of the big plays he made in the Clemson game. He's like, but if he had just gotten the ball out on time and it was there for him to get it out on time, he wouldn't have made that big play with his legs. It would have been a big play through the air. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's a redshirt freshman who's definitely had some hiccups along the way this year, especially early on in the season. But yeah, you can't deny what's happened over these last 5-6 games and what he's done. And I mean, he's just cool, calm, and collected. I mean, you talk to the guy and you almost kind of wonders, like, does this guy even does he even get real excited about football? Like he's just so like matter of fact and like, whatever. But that's definitely not. I mean, he's a football junkie. I mean, I've known him for several years now, just covering him in recruiting and knowing some people around him. That is definitely not the case. Like that guy, he is all ball. And kind of the interesting thing about him, to sort of close my little spiel here is he was a high school soccer player. He played a lot of soccer and scored maybe like 20 goals his sophomore season. So just a little unique thing about him. Not to mention, never mind the fact that he wears glasses and kind of has a Clark Kent look about him when he's not on the football field.
What a terrifying soccer player that is. You mentioned Mike Shula, a name from the past, former Alabama head coach, a longtime NFL assistant, was an offensive coordinator in the NFL as well. He replaces Dow Loggins, who goes to App State as the head coach. What is he? Does the offense change much with Mike Shula? What do you guys think of that? And what about the weapons around LaNorris Sellers without Rocket Sanders in there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'll be mostly what they've been this season in terms of the offense and what Shula's having them run here in a couple of days. Like anybody, whether you're the same offensive coordinator from the season or a new guy, there are going to be some wrinkles. I'm sure there will be some stuff that you guys see from Illinois' offense here in a couple of days that you're like, oh, that's new, that's different. So I would assume that we'll be seeing the same from Carolina here in the game. So whether or not there are wholesale changes within the offense, that's probably more of a thing for next year when it doesn't really apply to Illinois. But yeah, I'm sure there will be some wrinkles. But as far as who's around LaNorris and with Rocket being gone, they've got quite a few guys who've played a decent amount this year. Oscar Attaway has been the number 2 back and has really been productive this last month or so of the season, and spelling Rocket from time to time. And he's a veteran guy who transferred from North Texas and runs hard, seems to always fall forward, doesn't have necessarily the physical tools and skill set that you see with Rocket, and not many people do. But he's a good, tough runner. Juju McDowell, who's more of a scat back type of guy, could be involved. And they've got a couple younger guys who one's a freshman and Matthew Fuller, who might play a little bit, and another one's a second-year player who transferred in from South Carolina State this year, and Jaworn Howell, who they got from the portal before this season, who was fantastic as a freshman at SC State, and is a guy that personally I'm really excited to see, and I'm not the only one either. Like he's really talented, and I think we might see some of him as well on Saturday or Tuesday, whatever day the game's on. So they've got some pieces around LaNorris for sure, but yeah, they'll definitely be missing Rocket. There's no way to try to cover that up.
Hey, we're not required to know days of the week until we get back home. So I have the idea where we're at here. I'm curious, Hale, and you talked about it. You know, they skate by Ole Miss, just barely get by Ole Miss or Old Dominion rather, and you think, ooh, what is this going to be here, right? So when did you know? Was it that Alabama game, even though they lost it, that they kind of started to put it together? Like, when did you know this team could really hit the gas and end up putting together this kind of season?
I mean, well, so in the first half against LSU, because LaNorris got hurt, like with a minute left in the second quarter, so you kind of saw it then, like, hey, this could be something pretty special on offense as long as he's not too injured and they can get him back. But at the same time, I was like, well, LSU's defense is kind of Swiss cheese, and they're, so you just wanted to see it against somebody a little bit better. But that Alabama game was definitely a turning point, even though there were some pretty critical mistakes by LaNorris in that game, some turnovers that really affected things, quite frankly, and probably could have. There were a lot of fans who were still down on LaNorris because of some of the things he did in that game that might have cost them a win. But I thought that was the game to me where I was like, you know what? If you don't see the talent in this guy, and if you don't think that he's capable of putting this team on his back at times, and we're not seeing the same thing, we're not watching the same guy. I don't know, that the Oklahoma game, which was the following week, was pretty special, even though it was more of a defensive oriented type of win. I don't know. It was somewhere in that late October run when you're like, hey, the schedule lets up a little bit in November, and they could go on a run and win some games, and they certainly did. But I guess my roundabout way of answering your question, Joey, is that A&M game when they were at home and they just beat the brakes off of them. You're like, okay, the schedule sets up, and this thing they may not lose again, and they didn't.
Yeah, that's I want to get out of here on this. Hale is obviously Justin Stepp now at Illinois, the wide receivers coach, and he's a guy who, everything we've heard, has made a really big impact on the offense and on the receivers. And obviously, he came from South Carolina. So, what were your impressions of Justin Stepp, and obviously, kind of what he was able to do there with some of the receivers he developed?
Yeah, so I knew of Stepp a little bit because I covered Clemson from 09 to 15. So Stepp was a GA at Clemson then, and then he left to go to App State, and of course went to SMU with Chad Morrison in Arkansas and all that. So I knew of him pretty well, and knew that he was going to be a good developer of players, good developer of the talent once they got to the school. And he did a great job that way at South Carolina, whether it was Xavier Legette in 23 or Juice Wells in 22. In 21, they had a guy named Jalen Brooks, who's now with the Cowboys, who really made some strides as a player. Another guy named Josh Van, who played really well that season. So I think that to me is if you look back at Stepp's time at Carolina, it was what he was able to do with some of those players on Saturdays and how well they played and how impactful they were on those teams. So that to me is probably the biggest positive I would say about him from his three seasons coaching receivers for the Gamecocks.
Hale, before I let you go, I want to ask you just your impressions of this matchup. South Carolina, 10-point favorite, 9.5, 10.5, depending on where you look. I think that tells you a lot about the talent that South Carolina has. Illinois, obviously an overachieving team. But what do you think? Like, what would interest you most about this matchup?
Yeah, like I said, I'm a little behind on figuring out what I think about Illinois, so I don't want to try to say too much because I'm kind of uninformed right now. But if I'm looking at this just from the South Carolina perspective, I want to see what they do with the running game. Obviously, without Sanders, if there's going to be a significant drop off or not a lot of drop off, because that aspect of the offense has been key in helping things go is being able to run the ball effectively. Because one of the biggest question marks South Carolina had coming into the season was wide receiver. And, they've had some flashes at that position from a variety of guys. Delvon Campbell, for one, who started his career at Illinois, was basically a non-factor up until I guess it was the A&M game. Then he's been a real difference maker for the last month of the season. So if they can get some sort of a consistent running game going, then I think that'll kind of help open things up for LaNorris in the passing game. So, I mentioned Jordan Howell a little while ago. I'm excited to see if he gets some extended looks here on Tuesday. And then defensively, obviously missing Kennard, but that's it. I mean, they got everybody else. So are they playing at that same level as they have for most of the season? And I know Illinois is down their best receiver. And I guess the offensive lineman who's in the portal correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Was he a starter?
He was to begin the year, then he got replaced. But he's a rotation guy, and he's supposed to play. He's supposed to be available to play, Zy Chrysler. So be interesting to see. But certainly that offensive line. I mean, they've played Penn State and Oregon, who are pretty good, but this is a huge test for them, obviously.
Yeah. So like if South Carolina is still having some success pressuring Altmaier and disrupting things, I think it's probably just a safe general assumption on my part to say like it'll probably be a productive day for the defense, especially since Altmaier is going to be without his top weapon or receiver. That's probably going to be a pretty significant thing. I don't know. What do you guys think about it that way?
No, for sure. Illinois got some talent in the wide receiver room, but it's unproven. And Pat Bryant's just a difference maker. I think he should be a round 2 pick. So, I think South Carolina has a lot of advantages talent-wise in this game. And, being able to turn Sellers into a pocket passer, I think is going to be really important for Illinois. But that's easier said than done. But Hale McGranahan, man, we really appreciate the time. I know we went a little longer than we thought, but this was really insightful and gets Illini fans ready for the South Carolina team. So check out Hale, big Spur, part of 24/7 Sports Network for South Carolina. Really appreciate the time, Hale, and we'll see you at the Citrus Bowl, man.
Of course, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in a couple days.
If you're like my wife and I, you're a big coffee person, right? Well, I'm excited to tell you guys about a new local sponsor, Columbia Street Roastery. The guys at CSR just sent my wife and I a few bags of their freshly roasted, locally made blends, and I gotta say, we love it. We had one of their holiday blends, Crazy Elf, and their Tip of the Andes blend, and they're just smooth, fresh, and tasty coffee made right here in Champaign-Urbana. And right now, you can check out some of their holiday flavored coffees, including Crazy Elf, Christmas in a Cup, Santa Sunday Funday, which is kind of like a mocha, and then Jingle Bell Java and more. Or you can just try their wide variety of roasts, whether you like the light roast or the dark roast, or flavored coffees. Some of the fun varieties and flavors include Kahlua caramel cream, hazelnut vanilla, salted caramel mocha, Jamaican Me Crazy, cookie doodle, creme brulee, and sticky bun. So you got to try these out. Check out their teas as well. They also have hot chocolate, and all of it is freshly roasted and, most importantly, locally made. So head on over to csrcoffee.com and you can get free shipping on orders over $40. They have great gift items as well, like monthly subscription options to box sets like their 12 Days of Christmas. So head on over to csrcoffee.com and get 10% off your first order with code GOILLINI24. That's csrcoffee.com with code GOILLINI24 to get 10% off your first order.
All right, great stuff from Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur. Got to get to know a lot about South Carolina. I was watching them this morning, Joe. I'm right there with Hale. Like, I'm trying to play catch up with getting to know these teams. It's been so focused on the roster, right? So focused on this offseason. And then we get down here, and that's some of the first things we talk about. But now we're starting to look into this, and I'm starting to put together my preview and picks. And even without Rocket Sanders and Kyle Kennard, I mean, Illinois is without Pat Bryant, right? Like, some of the stars of this game are out, but South Carolina's got so much talent.
That is the difference in Illini Inquirer people. Is you woke up and started watching South Carolina film at probably 7 o'clock, and I was still sound asleep until about 9:30.
You'd be proud of me, man. I didn't get out of the hotel room until like 8:30, 8:45.
Who are you?
That's a sleep-in for me, man.
I think I accidentally bumped the alarm when I was plugging my phone in. I remember woken up at like 5:30, and I was like, Werner, you got to get your phone under control. This is awful. And then I knew it was right by my side. And I'm like, yeah, well, what are you going to do here?
First 2 nights, the alarm didn't go off. At 6 a.m. this morning, it goes off.
I think I plugged my charger in, and it's a big Apple charger. So, like, there's like a button on top. Yep. And as I tried to fall back asleep, I'm like, do you think that set the alarm? I don't know. No one cares about that, but I sure did. Yeah, it was not what I wanted.
So I hit the snooze. I hit the snooze button, Joe, and I was like, I don't think that's gonna go off again. So I was like fumbling around, trying not to wake you up again, trying to figure out
about 4 whiskeys, buddy. We were sleeping for a little bit. South Carolina, that defensive front. You start looking at the defensive numbers for what the Gamecocks were this year. That is a really good defense. Like Illinois, you go down the line, and I want to focus on the front because I think there's so much deserved focus to happen on that South Carolina front. Illinois seen really good defensive fronts. You go through
Penn
State, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are going to be first-round draft picks. Derek Harmon. I mean, they've seen really, really good defensive linemen. I'm not trying to say, hey, don't sweat South Carolina because you've seen those guys, but this is just another in the line of holy smokes, what a really good front. And the Illinois offensive line has been playing better. Some of that, Jeremy Franklin, may have been schedule assisted improvements down the stretch of the season, but that's the matchup to me, is their defensive front versus Illinois offensive line.
Well, Joe, we've been in Orlando a couple days now. How you liking it? I know you've been here before for the Johnny Newton.
This is a way different version of what, like, I was way out by the airport, and I would Uber to downtown where Johnny's draft party was. We drove by it yesterday. Really sweet place downtown. Yes, swanky place downtown. This has been fun. There's a cool little hub. It's called like the Point, I think.
Yeah.
And we've had a couple beers over there, some food, and that's been good. It's been pretty fun. Being in shorts for a week has been not anything I would complain about. I'm still not on where slides to media availability yet, but we're getting to that mode here, Jeremy. We'll see if we can make that happen.
All right, Joe. We have plenty of content up at Illini Inquirer. Joe wrote a great story about Luke Altmaier and just his comfort, and we've kind of been talking about it all year, his confidence. And you caught up with Chad Altmaier, who we saw out at the Point the other day, and it was really great stuff from him. And we've caught up with all the coaches, so go check that out at Illini Inquirer, all the content that we have coming out of here. But Joey, let's focus on this game to start before we get into some of the offseason stuff. Let's start our 6-pack of questions. Let's start here. Number one, what does a Citrus Bowl mean for Illinois?
Yeah, I thought you sent me the list of questions after I woke up, so I've had about 40 minutes to think about this. This is obviously 10 wins is a big deal, right? And Brett Bielema has said at Illinois football, this would be just the 5th time in program history. I think this would be Brett Bielema's 5th 10-win season as a head coach. Like, it just doesn't. Brett Bielema's a good head coach. He had great teams at Wisconsin. 10 wins that's a milestone that matters. It sets you apart. It's when you look back and you see that double-digit win totals. I was going through the record book, and it jumps off, right? You see how how that looks and how people will remember what this team was able to do. But I also was thinking a lot about 2022 and now, and just kind of the different routes here, right? Like 2022, for the better part, the first half of that season was just defensively absolutely dominant. Absolutely. I mean, you go to Wisconsin and you roll over the Badgers and you just have these moments where it's like, dang, this looks like a team that could win 8, 9, 10 games. And obviously what got in the way was stumbling down the stretch of the season. But this team is a little bit different, right? I mean, it feels like there hasn't been that dominant stretch. There's been really good stretches of play for Illinois, but it's such an odd – I don't know. I'm babbling because I don't really know how to land this. I hope you do. It's just two different feelings.
That 7-1 start was more dominant than anything this team has done. This team has just consistently won clutch games, right? Like by the skin of their teeth. But they've also, like, that's a skill. There's a skill to that. When you have a
we're not taking away from them doing that. It's so different than what we saw 2 years ago.
Yeah, like if you would have put this team up against the 22 team, would the 22 team be the favorite? I think there's
what half of the 22 team?
I just the whole team. Like if you had
what half of the season? There was two different teams from like week 8 on.
I don't know completely about that. I mean, they were pretty good against Michigan. The Purdue game and Michigan State game weren't great, but Purdue was a decent team. But still, you have Devin Witherspoon and Johnny Newton, and I feel like there's more top end talent on that 22 team, right? Like the NFL talent on that team, but this team feels deeper and has a quarterback that's an absolute difference maker. Like DeVito was good. He was, obviously an NFL quarterback now, but like what Altmaier is doing, especially down the stretch, and what he has around him with wide receivers and, running back situation is pretty good. It's not Chase Brown, but like, I feel like that 22 team might be a favorite over this team. But if this team's able to get to 10 wins, you just think about it'd be on the short list of best teams Illinois ever had. Like of the modern era, especially, right? Like, especially since 1990, it'd be one of the best teams along with 2001, 2007. I just think you'd put yourself in that echelon. And most important thing is I think of what it would mean for 2025 and recruiting. Like, I think if you upset the South Carolina team on network television, you should have a good audience because South Carolina is a national story. Like the story of the broadcast, get ready, Illinois fans, is should this team have been in the college football playoff? They're going to hit on that and hit on that. But if Illinois can turn the tide and become the story and win, and it was a 10.5-point underdog, I think Brett Bielema's team's going to get a lot of national publicity. There's going to be a lot of, hey, look what Brett Bielema is doing in Champaign. And I think you can enter the next season as a ranked team. Like, and all that comes with that, all the attention that comes with that, I think is huge. So, I think there's a lot to gain. I don't think there's a lot to lose here for Illinois, just being at this point and being at this stage. But there's a lot to gain if you can win this one, especially given all the talent that you can bring back for next year, right?
Well, Brett Bielema touched on that when we talked to him on whatever 2 days ago day was. Like what he said. Let me find
that was Friday, by the way.
It's great. It's news to me. He said, this is a really fun group overall with the energy they bring. They have a special place in Illinois football history I think is really cool. I've also been selling, obviously 10 wins is a big deal. The catapult this can be to 2025 is the team that we would not shy away from as a team that could hopefully be a playoff type team. Brett Bielema knows. He knows what could come back, and we will get into that here, Jeremy, in one of our 6-pack of questions here because it's a huge story from Orlando. But he also, just said the jump that it could be and kind of distancing yourself further and further from the view of what Illinois has been, right? And I thought he also was really good in touching on that. But yeah, this team does have the chance to return a lot of productivity, a lot of really talented players. And this is very much like that's what bowl games should be. It's, non-playoff bowl games are go have some fun, obviously try to notch that 10th win, which is no small deal, and catapult this into winter conditioning, into spring practices, into training camp, and so on.
If you win this game and you follow it up next year with a really good season, right? I think then you're starting to change the perception of your program.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like then you're establishing yourself as, hey, maybe Illinois is the new Wisconsin. Maybe Illinois is the new Iowa.
Maybe Illinois is just not old Illinois.
Yes.
right? Like that,
maybe
there's
Brett
so much
Bielema.
value there.
Yeah, maybe Brett Bielema has changed this program into what Barry Alvarez did at Wisconsin or what Hayden Fry did at Iowa, turning struggling programs into that, or Kansas State with Bill Snyder, all these guys he coached under. Illinois has never had, and I looked this up on the way here, I was talking about with you, Joey, like 8+ win seasons. They've never had 3 in 4 years. They have the potential to do that. And if you can have a 10-win season mixed with it, and it's not easy to back that up and do it again, but like you would have some hope going into next year that maybe they can be a college football playoff team. And I don't think it's any small thing that Brett Bielema put that out into the ether. Like that is like he's trying to change the expectations and raise the bar here. And I think beating a South Carolina team that is favored by 10+ points in the Citrus Bowl would be another huge step towards people believing in Illinois, including their own fan base and including their own people in the program.
Yeah, look, if they beat South Carolina, Brett Bielema is going to have like the Pop-Tart toaster sign, and he's going to be like, playoffs next year. He's going to lean into it. He should. And, you know, there's times I know Brett Bielema, and he really admitted on signing day or bowl day, whatever it was, that like, okay, we kind of knew like we weren't going to be in the playoffs, but he's going to go beat that drum until someone takes the drum away from him. And that's what he does. But I think, and I haven't asked him about this, so I feel, you know, kind of odd speculating. I don't know that this is as much about like, yeah, we're a playoff team. It's like, hey, we're not what everyone wants to keep telling me we are. And that every question I face about what we've done now is kind of painted against what this program has been in the past. And
yeah, he said, I respect this program's past. I understand it, but
shut up.
Basically, I don't give a crap. Like we're weighted down by the past. And God, as somebody who's covered this program for so long that the fans just expect a terrible shoe to drop, even with a great basketball program. Like Josh Whitman, Brad Underwood are all trying to change that, right? Of being like, why do you act like this? It's because of years of being let down,
Yes.
right? And years of disappointment. So I can understand it. But if you can get to 10 wins this year, even if you don't, but if you follow it up next year with another 8+ win season, Illinois has never done that 3 times in 4 years. Like, I think you should now, as an Illinois fan, expect good things from your football program, which is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, expect good things. And you see, and I, you know, the transfer portal is an obvious topic right now, but just get guys that kind of work with what they do. And are there misses? Absolutely. We could have asked Hale about the misses South Carolina has had in the transfer portal. We could ask any media member who is here from Miami or from Iowa State or go around. There's misses, but you see, you know, the talent evaluation is starting to show up a little bit. Maybe not at every single position, right? Like you still want to see more development on the offensive line, and the defensive line's got younger guys that are still developing, but you're starting to see, you know, you look in the secondary, Jeremy, and some of those younger guys that they've recruited, whether it be out of high school, JUCO, transfer portal, then you can go down Jaheim Clark, Caleb Patterson, Torrey Cox in that order. They're playing like Big Ten starters, right? They're playing like guys who can hold their own. And I think wide receiver has an opportunity to kind of step into that light on Tuesday. What I've come to know is Tuesday. I've got that right, I think.
Brett Bielema keeps calling it Saturday, by the way. Well, let's get into that, Joey. Let's go right to number 2 here, and you can go into probably the wide receivers here. Which Illini position group intrigues you most in the Citrus Bowl?
It's wide receiver, because Pat Bryant's not there. And someone has got to step up into that role. And I think we can look at, you know, there's kind of a few different avenues, right? It's Zachary Franklin has a monster day and is forced to talk to us after the game, which is not something he loves to do. Yeah. Maybe it's Colin Dixon in the slot, or maybe Colin Dixon steps outside, which I think is probably maybe a little less likely, and it's Hank Beatty in the slot. Maybe it's one of Malik Elzy or Alex Kapka-Jones. Like, there's a few different avenues for this to happen, but Illinois has to go down one of those avenues. And I think that is what's so fascinating to me, is how do they do their best to make up for the absence of Pat Bryant? And, you know, maybe the odds-on favorite is Zachary Franklin has a big game. That feels like it's kind of a no-brainer for a story. Obviously, you're looking at Alex Kapka-Jones, you're looking at a Malik Elzy, or a springboard for Colin Dixon or Hank Beatty, but just how that all pairs together is so interesting to me, because it has to. They were going to beat South Carolina. They've got to find some combination there that can lessen the blow of not having your second best, however you want to order, Pat Bryant, Luke Altmaier, offensive player.
I'm glad you mentioned the guys we know will make an impact because Zachary Franklin is a number one receiver, right? Like he has way more catches than any South Carolina wide receiver right now. So he is more than capable, but he's going to get a lot of attack now. So it's going to be harder for him to get open without Pat Bryant on the other side. But I think Colin Dixon and Hank Beatty, this is a great showcase for them to show what they can do with more targets. Maybe those guys get 5 to 10 targets, which usually they get, 2 or 3 in a game. Now those guys get, 5 plus. But obviously, like, all right, Malik Elsie, here's your chance. Justin Bullock's coming in. Illinois showing interest in other transfer wide receivers, right? Do they add another one? Like, this is a chance to kind of showcase that, hey, you don't need another one. I can be that number one wideout or starting wideout next year. Alex Kapka-Jones played a ton against Rutgers. So, like, as much as we want to see Elsie, Alex Kapka-Jones played over him at Rutgers. I know Malik Elsie's been hurt, later in the season, but like he has a chance to showcase himself to be like, I should be a part of this rotation next year because Luke Altmaier has shown some of these guys trust. And I think Luke Altmaier next year is going to have a different kind of approach because you can't just throw it up for Pat Bryant every time. Right.
Pat Bryant, Isaiah Williams, Casey Washington, Zachary Franklin. Like if you look, sorry to cut you off, Jeremy, but if you look at the stats over the last couple of years, it's very top 2 or 3 dominated. And right? Isaiah Williams was the first team All Big Ten. Casey Washington was a draft pick. Pat Bryant was first team All Big Ten by the AP and a whiff of the second team by the others. So like obviously you go to those guys, but what happens when that's a little bit more spread out, at least early? Yeah. And I think maybe by the end of the season, some of those numbers skew closer towards what we've seen in the last 2 years. But early, I think it's going to have to be a feeling out process. And this feels like a moment where you can kind of get a jump start on that. Or I shouldn't say that because, as you mentioned, his trust that we've seen in LZ and Kapka-Jones in the moments we've seen them, but to maybe kind of fortify that trust and take that into the offseason.
A huge opportunity for all those guys. I would also add linebackers. Because LaNorris Sellers is an unbelievable runner. He had 170 yards against Clemson, ran for 100 against Texas A&M. Without Rocket Sanders, he is so important to their rushing attack. And the wide receivers they have, like Nick Harbor's 6'5" and is an All-American sprinter, but is he the greatest football player? Maybe not. Dale Von Campbell, 6'4", 200 pounds. Like their best receiver is really their tight end. So I feel like if you could force him to be a pocket passer, then you can do all right. But I would expect them to try and do what they did against Jalen Daniels, right? Which is just force him into being a pocket passer, spy him for most of the game. And this is a great, I think, opportunity for Malachi Hood.
Yeah, I was going to get my Malachi Hood sign.
He's the athlete. He's the speed. And, he can close on LaNorris Sellers. Now, bringing him down is difficult because Sellers is bigger than Malachi Hood. He's like 10 to 15 pounds more than Malachi Hood. So I think he's going to get a lot of playing time in this one. But James Kreutz, Ryan Mead, those guys got to step up and make some plays in open field against a very, very talented quarterback. So, the bowl games always provide some opportunities for younger guys. But I think at wide receiver and linebacker, especially, that's where we're going to see it. All right, number 3. What concerns you most about South Carolina, Joey?
LaNorris Sellers. Because you've seen quarterback – gosh, we haven't had to say this in a while because there have been a lot of football games here in a while, Jeremy, obviously. But quarterbacks that can move have just been a problem for Illinois. And then you put in someone like LaNorris Sellers who's massive and really, really talented and can move really, really well. That is a scary proposition. It's like,
he reminds me of like Aiden Childs, only more talented. Like another level. Like I
like next year's Aiden Childs, right?
Yeah. Like he's like a souped up Aiden Childs.
And that's been a problem for Illinois. And we talk about it every single time that there's a quarterback that can really do damage with their legs. And we have. And obviously Illinois is not alone, Jeremy, and struggling. That's why quarterbacks who could run are so sought after. And people freak out when they play them because it's really hard to deal with them. But you kind of go back and look at the stats, and Illinois has struggled in some of those matchups. You can go back to Toledo with DeQuan Finn, Jalen Daniels. Dylan Gabriel got out and moved a little bit, right? And that's been a problem. Aiden Childs was a concern we had, and that didn't end up being a big thing. I'm not going to throw Jack Lausch at Northwestern in there because that was more of a runner than a thrower. But
who they did a pretty good job of containing too that you didn't think of as a running quarterback, but Drew Aller. I thought they did a really good job against Drew Aller, and it's just they ran all over him with the running backs because the running backs and offensive line are so good. But Drew Aller can really get out and run, and I thought they did a good job containing him. And he didn't make a lot of plays with his arm. So I think that's the mode. You're trying to do the Kansas Penn State game plan, and those worked pretty well for Illinois. But Aiden Childs obviously got loose a little bit against Illinois with some big runs, but I just feel like those linebackers are key for that.
Yeah, hey, you can throw Purdue
outside linebackers too.
Throw Purdue into that mix as well. That second half against Purdue, so that's so big to me. And I'm curious, just the Malachi Hood effect in there, because he is, if you think of a linebacker that could keep some contain there, could keep those quarterbacks and LaNorris Sellers from running all over. It's a guy who's a really good athlete, who's got strength, who's got speed, who I was just really impressed in watching him spy, just mirroring Jack Lausch at Northwestern. I think that was really meaningful and not an accident, and something that is a skill. So that's such an interesting matchup. For as much as I'm sure you'll probably say the defensive front, and we'll have two different options, and that's perfectly fine because those are the two big storylines on each side of the ball. But keeping Sellers as contained as you possibly can is massive. And as you said, make him throw into what you think is a secondary that's good now, that's going to be good next year, and so on down the line, and see if, and let him beat you, or make him beat you rather, with his arm, and not by 15 missed tackles against Clemson forced. 15. Clemson. They are playing on New Year's Day. Like that's an absurd number. That is unbelievable that a quarterback forced 15 missed tackles against a Clemson team that's not maybe Clemson that we've seen year over year over year. Still a college football playoff team. Still a team that won the ACC. That's scary, man. But he can move.
Yeah. And then the other thing with them is the defensive front. Like that's terrifying. Kennard being out is nice. Like it is nice that he is out. He's the Bronco Nagurski Trophy winner, the best defender in the country. Like there's some other guys that obviously deserve that, but he won it. Led the SEC, I believe, with 10.5 sacks, 14 tackles for loss. But Dylan Stewart looks like a potential top 5 draft pick in a couple of years. Maybe he's just a first rounder, but he's still really, really talented and a freshman All-American. TJ Sanders is top, he's a day 1 or day 2 pick on the interior. They got 2 other 4-stars. Their edge rushers filling in for Kennard had 3.5 sacks and limited snaps. Like they're just loaded. It's an SEC defensive front and one of the best in the country, and still really good without Kennard. And, Illinois has played against groups like that, but they've struggled with groups like that, whether it's Penn State or Oregon. So Michigan, they did pretty well. So that's still amazing to me how well they played against Michigan, but they were able to run the football against Michigan, which I thought was huge. And obviously Michigan wasn't able to move the football themselves. So I think South Carolina's offense is going to pose more concerns for Illinois than Michigan. So I just feel like running the ball is going to be kind of underrated in this one, Joey. Stay ahead of the sticks, right? Like getting to 2nd and 6, getting to 3rd and 3 is going to be really important, because you do not want them to pin their ears back, especially when you don't have Pat Bryant to just lob it up to. Illinois has got to be productive on 1st and 2nd down, so you're just not facing 3rd and long, because I don't like those matchups against Illinois' offensive line, which has improved, but hasn't played this good of a defensive front probably since Oregon.
Yeah, it's a really scary matchup, and you've seen – I think more quicker. Abdul Carter gives everyone a problem, but Nebraska had a good defensive front, but they were a little bit more stout, and Michigan was probably more stout than quick. And I think Illinois can do a little bit better in those matchups. And maybe I'm imagining things, Jeremy. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Michigan's got some quickness with Graham and Josiah Stewart, but Penn State's a different level of
right.
Quick
Carter's
and
a freak.
twitchiness. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to always go back and compare to what happened against Penn State, because Carter does that to a lot of teams. He's probably going to do that to a lot of teams.
Hopefully the Packers in a Bears uniform, shortly enough.
You had to do that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Just had to.
He won't
have
be
your
there.
fun. Can we say, before we move on to number 4, we were talking around kind of yesterday, and someone in one of the media groups from I don't know where, they said, they're a 49ers fans, said we'd be happy to take Kyle Shanahan, send Kyle Shanahan anywhere. And Jeremy's like, yeah, right here. Like
I'll give you draft picks for him. Yeah.
He just saw Scott Frost in the flesh, and Jeremy was ready to embrace the idea of Kyle Shanahan coming to Chicago.
It's good to see my boy.
I saw him, and I was just like, Jeremy, oh my God. I thought he was looking for you.
Yeah, he's at UCF. He's catching up to Brett Bielema. Brett Bielema's first win at Illinois was against Scott Frost in Nebraska. But he's back home. Like this is where he should be. So I'm happy for Scott Frost to get this job back and get a Big 12 head coaching job. Not bad landing spot for him.
I know you guys have heard me talk about Home Field Apparel a lot, but there's a reason. I have some of these shirts from Home Field Apparel, and they are a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. And what I love about them is they're focused on creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. So go to homefieldapparel.com and check out their Illini gear. The Flying Illini t-shirt I love. If they have any bomber jackets, go check those out. But you see all of these vintage designs that are great. They kind of stand out in a crowd, but also these are comfortable, well-fitting. They're not the boxy kind of ones you get at the random department store. No, these are well-fitted, comfortable t-shirts and apparel. So go check it out at homefieldapparel.com. Go to the drag down menu, click on Illini, and you'll see all of these great shirts, including Orange Crush, old school Fighting Illini basketball shirts, the Flying Illini t-shirt with the great winged logo, Script Illini gear, including t-shirts, hoodies, an orange ringer tee, the 2004-05 Illinois basketball shirts so you can relive those glory days, but also they have great hoodies, great crew necks, great Illini football gear, including the 80s Illini helmet on there. If you're an old school sweatshirt guy, they got those. If you're a quarter zip guy, they got those. If you want a women's tank there with the Script Illini, they got that. So go to homefieldapparel.com to check out all the great gear they have there. And if you're not an Illini fan, they have more than 180 plus growing list of schools. So you can check out all the gear from all over the country. And right now, use code Illini24 for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. That's Illini24 for 15% off all of the gear at homefieldapparel.com.
All right. What gives you most optimism, Joey, against South Carolina?
That's a really good question. I do like where the secondary is right now, Jeremy. And if you can make Sellers, and I say this, like, I don't want to come off like Sellers can't make throws. The dude can make throws, and he can be a major problem. But I think you would prefer to make him and those wide receivers beat you downfield than you would in trying to contain him from running all over. And I really like where the secondary
the defense? Like the defense has played decently well here recently. And I know Northwestern scored late, and this is a way bigger task, but Gabe Akis is playing. Xavier Scott is playing. Like this defense is intact. Like that's really encouraging.
Yeah, and then you look not only at the defense intact, you can go and look at some of the younger guys who have forced Illinois' hand for snaps, and they're Jaheim Clark, a guy who's been targeted, but you see it. You can see he's going to be a productive defensive back for Illinois. We talked about Malachi Hood, James Kreutz. I'm really fascinated by Alec Bryant. If we're going to stay on this defensive side, I know Seth Coleman, I don't think we've said it on the podcast yet, but Bielema said he's been practicing. We saw him yesterday. They were just doing stretching, but he wasn't slinged up. I mean, he was in full uniform going through everything. We'll see what his availability, his productivity can be on Tuesday against South Carolina, but Seth Coleman would have that door. So I do like, boy, this defense has been so up and down, right?
The thing is, like, South Carolina without Sanders, it's so reliant on Sellers. Like there's not a wide receiver. I mean, they have some talented guys, right? So I'm not trying to say like Illinois can handle that, but it's like Sellers is so important to what they do without Sanders there. Like he is like everything with that offense. Like South Carolina's defense is way better than I think it's offense at this point. So they got some good offensive linemen, they got some veterans, they got a freshman All-American left tackle. So there's still a lot of talent there, but without Rocket Sanders, like I feel like the defense has a chance to give their offense a chance in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you with South Carolina. The caveat is there's a guy at quarterback for South Carolina who can really even that playing field pretty quickly, right? With just how talented he is. I do like where this defense is right now, and a lot of it, as I said, a lot of it is those younger guys who have provided depth. They've been meaningful rotation players and had big moments. James Kreutz in that conversation. So I think the defense is finding its way, and obviously, we say that, and we haven't talked about Luke Altmaier.
Well, you got a quarterback who can match or exceed what Sellers does, right?
Yeah,
that's a great thing to have.
I will cede the Luke Altmaier floor to you because I feel like that's probably part of the reason it would give you confidence in South Carolina.
It's every game. It's Luke Altmaier, right? You have a quarterback that gives you a chance, and you have a quarterback that gives you a chance going into next year. It's just he has been the competitive advantage all year. I think we've said everything we can about Luke Altmaier throughout the year. Like, but you have a guy like you're sitting there going, man, LaNorris Sellers is really, really good. So it's Luke Altmaier. So you got a guy that can match that. It doesn't feel like you have a huge disadvantage at that position. And to be honest with you, Luke Altmaier takes care of the ball a little bit better, right? He doesn't throw as many picks as Sellers. And both of them can be sloppy with ball security. Like Sellers had 11 fumbles, I believe, according to PFF, and Luke's around that number as well. So I feel like you have a chance to potentially win the takeaway battle. And as the underdog in this game, you got to win that.
Yeah, the only thing we haven't said about Luke Altmaier, pretty good actor. Could see more of him.
Cheez-It commercial. Look at that, man.
Cheez-It commercial was good. I know they filmed another one here in Orlando after arriving, and the
video comeback video. Like, look at this guy.
Pretty good actor, this guy. I mean, I think there's something there. The only thing we told him he needs to work on between December and really next season is got to get that mullet. I mean, you really got to lean in and make that.
You want him to go like Quinn Ewers a couple of years ago style mullet.
Absolutely. If you could work like a headband in there, if you could maybe consider a Gardner Minshew type of approach, I would just.
You're turning him to Jim McMahon here.
Yeah, just go for it. Have a blast. And, I was really hoping we'd see more of that mullet by this point in the calendar, but do it.
He definitely seems to trim it, right? Like he doesn't just like
let
let it
Regrettably,
go wild.
yeah, regrettably. That's really the big offseason improvement I think we need to see from Luke Altmaier.
But there's some good hair in this team. Colin Dixon growing it back out, growing that furrow back out.
TJ McMillan, sneaky good hair candidate.
Well, it's the hair mustache combination with TJ McMillan. It's fantastic. And
it's kind of like Aiden Hall vibes from a few years ago. Aiden Hall's still on the team. Aiden Hall had a similar. This is where we really.
Matt Percentage, of course, is all American hair team. So
this is what we're doing right now.
But it's not natural for Mac. We got to get the story.
He said, "Boy, I feel like we talked."
Maybe it used to be straight.
Yeah, but I think we might be thinking of Jake Davis because we did ask him about that.
Oh, that's right.
All media days. We're confusing the great heads of hair, and that's embarrassing for us on this podcast where we specialize in those conversations.
It's all jealousy on my end. All right, number 5, bullish or bearish, Joey, on Illinois getting J.C. Davis, Gabe Backus, and Xavier Scott back. I am sorry to all Bulls and Bears fans for this, but bullish means you're buying into that they're coming back. Bearish, of course, means you don't.
Do you want to go? Can we do individually, like 1 through 3, that we think would make the most sense? 1 makes the most sense is Xavier Scott. Your brother's coming in. I think there's another step for you to take as a defensive back. Even though we know that the NFL likes Illinois defensive backs, and Xavier Scott has done a lot this year, I think next season could really be that. That's not fair to say.
Can I start here? I think all these guys would get drafted. I think all of these guys would get drafted if they go in. It's just, I think J.C. Davis is a late day 3 pick, most likely, or day 3 pick, just in general, 5 through 7. Xavier Scott, I think, could be a mid-round pick, but I think it'd be closer to day 3. Gabe Backus is the one that's most interesting to me because I think he could sneak into day 2, but maybe he's a day 3 guy going in. I think all of these guys feedback from the NFL. It's either round 1, round 2, or go back to school. I think all these guys will get the advice to go back to school. And of course, for J.C. Davis, that'd be a surprise because he now has an extra year of eligibility due to the Pavia case ruling for the NCAA. But that's kind of how I feel. I think they all would get drafted, but I think they all in the NIL era, revenue sharing era, could benefit from another year back.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think in the order I would maybe imagine them back is Scott, Davis, Backus. And that's just a gut feel. That's not necessarily anything we've heard from X, Y, or Z person. It's just kind of how I've thought of that, just as really for what the reasons you mentioned in terms of where we think they could possibly be drafted in this year's draft. Davis is such a surprise, and we have to start there because I feel like that is the biggest story to this point in Orlando is for 3 weeks we've watched Illinois, okay, what tackle are they kind of in on in the portal, but who they bringing on campus, who are they kind of attached to? And if the answer all along is you get J.C. Davis back for a second year, that is a monumental offseason win. To get your left tackle and your quarterback back for another year, that's enormous. I don't think we can overstate that because not only are you getting your left tackle back, if that's the case, your whole offensive line is coming back for another year. And for as much as we've talked about the offensive line, as much as the offensive line at times, Jeremy, has deserved to have been talked about and been criticized for some of the ways that it's had, some of the games that it's had, that's a big deal. And then you can maybe you bring in another guard, maybe you bring in another tackle, and you move some pieces around and you really force depth and force competition at key positions on this offensive line. That's huge. And just to have the door open for your left tackle to come back, who's an all Big Ten, was he 3rd team, all Big Ten left tackle? That's enormous. What a possibility, or such a big possibility. Brett Bielema told us he hopped a plane on like December 22nd, 23rd, and it went out to California to recruit this dude back to Illinois.
We say people in the program, multiple people in the program were shocked Brett Bielema put that out there. But I think it shows how valuable he could be. Like outside of Luke Altmaier, JC Davis would be tied with Gabe Backus for me. For the most important guys to come back on this team, because one rushes the passer, one stops the pass rush, right? And that is the name of the game. It's why the NFL spends such high draft picks and so much money on left tackles and edge rushers. So if you could find a way to get those two back along with Luke Altmaier, it would be a home run of an offseason before I add James Thompson and all the defensive line recruits, before I add Ethan Hampton and Justin Bullock. So, I feel like it makes a lot of sense for JC Davis. One, you can make a lot of money. You can make a lot of money coming back to Illinois, and just as much money, if not more, than you would if you go to the NFL. Like if he's a 6th-round pick, maybe you get a little bit more going back to the NFL. But if you're a 7th-round pick or an undrafted free agent, I think you can make more coming back to school and playing for Illinois. And I think he can help his draft stock. He's still just 21 years old. So if you can get him back, that'd be monstrous. And then, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to clarify, just in case people aren't as familiar with the case. JC Davis played 1 year at junior college. That year now he becomes, doesn't count towards his eligibility because he would have been out this offseason. This is not for every junior college kid yet, but right now you're going to be out of eligibility. You had this year. That's why Zyke has entered the transfer portal, as we talked about with Hale. He's probably looking to go somewhere to start. Mississippi State would be a team that makes sense to me.
Yeah, he'll get a Power 4 starting job.
Yes, but that's why. So if maybe you weren't focused on the ins and outs of the many, many lawsuits the NCAA faces these days, if you played if you played NAIA, if you played JUCO, and you were out of eligibility right now, like this was your final year, you got the opportunity to come back, and JC Davis falls into that category, and that would be a massive win if Illinois can convince him to come back.
Yeah, and they did this because Diego Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback, sued, saying that the NJCA, the junior colleges, aren't under the NCAA umbrella. So why does it count against my eligibility? So Ben Hummerhouse can come back for another year because he played in NAIA. So this will impact a lot of people, but it's not certain for JUCOs moving forward. I think this is all going to lead to the NCAA having 5 years of eligibility to play in 5 years. I think that's
getting kind of you're hearing more and more coaches say this is fine. Like, let's do this 5 years and call it and be good there. So that's probably the end.
Illinois. What a win for Illinois.
Literally could not have come at a better time for Illinois. Like, if this happens last year, you're like, okay. But, man, this would be huge for Illinois.
Because we've heard them attach to other offensive linemen, like Miles McVay was here, but whether Illinois pushed hard for him, as hard as maybe North Carolina wanted, I don't think so. And then Aiden Knapkick out of Idaho visited here and hasn't committed anywhere. He's a potential tackle option if you don't get JC Davis. And then DJ Wingfield, JC Davis's former teammate at New Mexico, is transferring out of Purdue. Illinois is going to host him for an official visit next week. So he's a possibility to add, who can add guard or tackle versatility. So if you could get Davis and Wingfield, who both were coached under Byron Bell, the assistant offensive line coach at New Mexico, what an offensive line you'd be bringing back. And then if you can bring Gabe Backus back from the defensive front, Joey, with what you've added with James Thompson, who's a huge get.
Pretty high on Illinois' board, by the way.
Yeah, huge get for Illinois. And Kurt Neal's a solid rotation player. They think can play like T-Rod Edwards at nose tackle, a quicker guy on the interior. And then Tamiwa Durjaye is a really athletic kid, has some similarities athletically to Dennis Briggs. I don't think he's as good as Dennis Briggs quite yet, but has a lot of talent. And then Leon Lowry had another option outside linebacker. So to rebuild the trenches like that with some of your own guys, and then to add on the defensive front would be huge. And I don't want to overlook Xavier Scott because he was one of the team's best players this year and certainly changed the Kansas game. I thought he was awesome. What was the game? Against Minnesota with Daniel Jackson. Left with the injury, and I think they would have won that game if Xavier Scott would have been in the game still. So the fact that we're talking about Illinois could bring all those guys back, I know I keep hammering the retention thing, Joey, but it's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing, like how well they've been able to retain this roster.
Yeah, it's something that maybe you're more of a new faces in the portal type of person, and you get excited by the free agency of college football. That's fine, I understand that. But to be able to possibly bring back all of those guys who have been in your system, who know the ins and outs of how things go, who, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, remember when Alex Palczewski, I think it was Alex Palczewski, when he was on his way out, one of us asked, like, who's going to be the one to tell people what this was, right? Like, we do this because we stunk and we were part of teams that stunk. And this is, kind of why this may sound weird to you that we do this way, but we do it because we don't want to go back there. Like, to have kind of some of those guys who have continued to pass that down, it's cliche and it probably isn't super meaningful on the field, but I think those voices are really, really valuable. And your Gabe Akis as a primary voice on your defenses, your Xavier Scotts, your Matthew Bailey's not in this conversation, but I would absolutely put him as one of those primary voices. I don't think you can overlook that entirely.
Yeah. All right. Number 6, Joey, other potential transfer additions. I think there's 3 clear needs, right? I mean, we got to wait for Davis, but even with Davis, I think you got to add another offensive lineman because you are losing Zy Chrysler, and who can blame him, right? Like, I think he likes Illinois. It seems like it's very
he's
amicable.
Here. Yeah, he's in Orlando. He likes Illinois.
He's a big addition for them to be a 2.5-year starter, started 30 games for Illinois, still as part of the rotation. Like, he was a really good addition along with Isaiah Adams in that class, but he can just go and be a Power 4 starter and make a lot of money somewhere else. So I don't think there's any, anything wrong with that. Hunter Whitenack played a little bit here. He's now at Western Michigan. Kevin Wigginton's probably going to get a group of 5 starting job somewhere. So, but they got some depth to replace because while we think TJ McMillan, Brandon Hansen, some of these other guys will develop and maybe be in that top 8. I really think they could use a 6th guy who could potentially start and be potentially push for one of those starting jobs for a guy like Brandon Hansen or Henderson, who we really like, but still has to show he can be more consistent as he becomes an upperclassman, and just to push some of the other guys. And Illinois stayed pretty healthy on the offensive line here again this year, but that's not always the case. You got to have a 6th guy that you believe can start. So that'd be my number 1 need.
Yeah, and I want to add, I don't know that it just not center is really what we're talking about. I think you're set there. So do you bring in a tackle and consider the idea of Melvin Priestley going to guard, where I think they think he can be good, where it's probably his next level spot? Do you bring in another guard to push your Brandon Hendersons, your Josh Geskis? But I think there's options. It doesn't have to be, one if JC Davis comes back. If JC Davis goes and you need a left tackle and you need one immediately, and then still probably another depth piece. So, JC Davis's decision probably to me shapes how many offensive linemen you're still in the conversation for. But I do think there are different combinations and different ways you can build this offensive line out to still, have your best 5 out there and see how that shakes out over the course of camp.
Tight end, any other inline blocker, right? Like Tanner Arkin is going to be a part of this. Cole Rusk is going to be a part of this. But they need another inline blocker. Like, we speculate like Jordan Anderson would be a really interesting addition to the tight end room if they want to move him over there. But
I would still like another blocker.
You need an inline tight end, and hopefully a guy that can catch it a little bit, but you need another blocker because they use 12 personnel so often. And punter, like Fabrizio Pinton, it's your time to shine now with Hugh Robertson gone and Declan Dooley going to be gone here, but they need another option, especially with Fabrizio being a senior next year. So they need another option who can step in and potentially push Pinton, who's only punted 6 times now. They were pretty good, but he's only punted 6 times in his life.
Yeah, punter is a sneaky need for Illinois. Those are the top 3. And again, I don't want to continue to harp on it, but we're not talking about linebacker. Now, if you add a wide receiver, and I still think that's very much a possibility, Jeremy, and I think they're probably still snooping around to see what's out there at wide receiver. You're getting greedy if you want to go that route. That's not.
You're probably pushing somebody out. I think I really do think you're probably pushing somebody out if you had another wide receiver. But hey, it could be worth it, right? Like it's okay to lose somebody as long as you upgrade.
Yeah, that's right. And we're not talking. I think if you were to get in the market for another defensive back, again, you're being greedy. But I don't think that's just see how far your pitch can go, probably. Versus, my goodness, if you're Illinois, you need starters, and saw that as the case last offseason, and it won't be the case this offseason, but maybe they do. Maybe they kind of fish around to see what's out there in the secondary, but those are just add-ons, right? Those are just kind of cherries on top of the 3 largest needs remaining on this roster.
Yeah, and you can get greedy because you could be really good. Like if you think you can upgrade at wide receiver for Luke Altmaier's last season, I'm all about it. Like if you can find that guy who can push that. I do want to mention Illinois players can still enter the portal. They have 5 days until after the Citrus Bowl. So January 5th, January 6th, one of those days, like they would be able to enter the portal until then. So we've been surprised that some other guys haven't entered the portal, but they certainly can do that still. All right, let's wrap this up, Joey. Illini picks to click for the Citrus Bowl. Who you got on offense?
Can we hold on? I'm glad you brought this up. Can we pivot a pick just an idea because it's a bowl game? Do something a little different.
Go for it.
One offensive and one defensive kind of not picks to click, but like a rotation player, a younger guy who has a moment. I think that is more fun than saying Luke Altmaier and Gabe Akis.
Sure.
Right.
Okay. So
now, I didn't prepare for this, so I'm hoping you will go first so I can think about that.
I don't know if it's a young guy for me.
It doesn't have to be. Just maybe someone who's not like okay, I will go first. I guess I have some ideas. Maybe that'll shape your.
I got one on offense. Can
okay.
I give one on offense?
You can.
Hank Beatty.
All right.
Get the ball out quickly, right? Because against this defensive front, maybe you get some screen passes. We haven't seen a lot of those this year. Like Zakari gets a couple, Pat gets a couple. But I think screen passes could be more involved. Like that slot could maybe Colin Dixon plays more on the perimeter and Hank Beatty gets some more reps. But I just think Hank Beatty could get like 5 targets in this game and maybe have 50 yards or something like that. Because I think Luke Altmaier trusts him, man. And I think they're going to want to try and get the ball in his hands, see if he can make some plays in space and get rid of that ball quickly. So Luke isn't, you can stay ahead of the sticks, right? So I'll go Hank Beatty as maybe a guy that can surprise in this game.
I will go with the people's choice because I think the obvious position on offense is wide receiver. It has to be. I don't imagine Khalil Valentine runs for 100 yards against South Carolina, right? Malik Elsey, take this thing into the offseason. Have a game.
Giving the people what they want, Joe.
I am giving the people what they want. That's what I try to do in between being a crusty old young man and complaining all the time. I do think beyond just that, it is time, right? It is time to show that you're going into your 3rd year now. Man, you get so kind of wrapped up in the day-to-day, you forget about some of those years. Show that you can be that guy. And you can, if you kind of do the look at Justin Stepp and Barry Lonnie and Brett Beal and say, you don't need to add another wide receiver. I am ready to make that leap. Let's go. Let's party here. And Luke Altmaier, I can be your guy next season. I can be your trusted, Pat Bryant, Zakari Franklin. Give it to me on 3rd and 5. Give it to me in those moments and let me go. And we'll see. But I just feel like if there were ever a stage to be set for him, it's this with the opportunity. So I'm very fascinated by him.
I just wonder if it's Kafka Jones. I wonder if he's getting more
100%.
reps, right?
100%.
Like that's what I'm interested to see in this game. All right, defense, you can go first on this one.
I'm just gonna,
give people what they want.
Who do the people want? Malachi Hood?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I'm really interested just in him and because he's so different than what they have right now until the next group of linebackers since 2025 class comes in. But he's so different, and those differences probably match up as well as any other linebacker in terms of what you'll probably need them to do against LaNorris Sellers. And I can't shake what he looked like against Northwestern and the way that it's like you finally kind of saw the window open and he really, really took advantage of that moment. And I'm sure that gave him confidence. It should have. The way that he played Northwestern is not good. And maybe at the end of the day, it's that he had a good game against a team that isn't very good. But I think the traits that we've known Malachi Hood to have for the last 3 years, 4 years, when going back to his time at JCA, I think those translate really, really well to what Illinois could need from him in this game.
I just feel like now the sign has changed from Joe Barna to Malachi Hood.
I've got a lot of signs. We've got a ton of signs, man.
Can I give you kind of a random one?
Yeah.
Because I just don't know if Seth Coleman's going to play in this game, right? We saw him kind of practicing, moving around. We got to follow up. JoJo Hayden.
Oh, I like that.
3rd downs. He's been playing a lot. He's been getting a lot of pressures here. Kanena has been part of that as well. But I feel like JoJo Hayden's been getting a lot of pressure when he gets on the field. And for a mobile guy like LaNorris Sellers, I wonder if he gets some more reps and is a guy who can make some plays and chase him down. So I think JoJo Hayden's been kind of a sneaky guy in the rotation, especially that pass rush package. And he's just a guy I think could get some more reps with Seth Coleman out here.
Yeah, and we talk about linebackers against Sellers. Those edges have got to contain too, and that is really where we've seen some struggle from Illinois against mobile quarterbacks is on the edge. So I like that Hayden. But if you can get him into 3rd down, let that guy get after him and get some pressure and see what he can create. Because again, we say this because these could be jumping off points going into spring practices, and all of a sudden it's not, geez, you count down the days till Dylan Rosiak's back, or ooh, thank goodness you got Gabe Atkins. It's now you can look at a JoJo Hayden, a Malachi Hood, a Jaheim Clark, or right on down the line, and kind of have some buzz going into the offseason.
All right, last one, and we'll wrap up, Joey. Bold prediction for the Citrus Bowl. Who you got?
Ooh,
I'll give you mine. I think Illinois is going to get 2 or more takeaways in this game. Sellers fumbles the ball a little bit. He does throw. He's thrown 7 interceptions, I think, in 11 games so far this year. But I know they're not Northwestern, right? South Carolina's not Northwestern. But this defense is not taking the ball away all that much during the last half of the season. But they did against Michigan. They did against Northwestern. And I just feel like if you can make him a pocket passer, maybe you can have another Kansas-like performance where you make a quarterback uncomfortable a little bit and you get a couple takeaways, and maybe that keeps you in the game and gives you a chance to win in the fourth quarter. So I think Illinois gets some takeaways with a month to kind of prep for this game. And, Aaron Henry's had a lot of time to prepare for Illinois Sellers. So I think they'll have a game plan that gives them a chance.
I'm looking at, oh my gosh, I wanted to get really, really bold and say like Josh McCray runs for 100 yards. South Carolina does not give up a lot of rushing yards, so I don't know.
Really good.
That is bold. I'm going to say defensively, and I wish I had more parameters on how I think about this. I did forget about bold predictions. You'll be shocked to hear, and I did not at all think about that. You said we had one more. I'm like, what could this reasonably be? I have no idea. Matthew Bailey is going to have a game.
He's going to be my preview and picks. He's a really important matchup on their tight end in this game because their tight end is their best target in this game. So I agree. Matthew Bailey, glad you mentioned him because he's been playing like a star lately. Their tight end, by the way, Joshua Simon, leads them in receptions with 34, receiving yards 450, 6 touchdowns. One of just 4 tight ends in the country who leads their team in all of those 3 categories.
Yeah, so now I have to try to put parameters on what a bold prediction other than Matthew Bailey is good, which is not a bold prediction. I think he'll force a takeaway.
Matthew Bailey, star of the game. Go with it.
That's fine. Takeaway and double-digit tackles.
Love it. He's been playing awesome. Like he looks like he's gonna be an absolute star next year. Like,
he looks like what we remembered in going into Tampa or where are we at? Orlando, going into Tampa 2 years ago. Like that kind of way we talked about him, even though he was in the dime package. I feel like you can build some of that post-2022 season buzz with him going into 2025.
Yeah. All right, Joey and I are hoping to have a special guest on the Illini Inquirer podcast before we get to game time here. So be on the lookout for that. That's potential to happen. But keep up at IlliniInquirer.com with all the content we have. Joey's had some great pieces here. We got more availability today. We're going to dive more into this team. And I'm putting together my preview and picks as well. So we'll have all that at Illini Inquirer. But thank you, everybody, for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review, wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like button. Subscribe to us. Hit the notifications bell as well. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.